For 2 millennia, Christian ecclesiology has wrestled with a single defining question regarding its leadership. How exactly does an individual acquire the spiritual authority to teach, govern, and lead a church? The 16th century Protestant Reformation introduced a distinct answer to this question. Martin Luther argued that pastors operate purely as functional delegates for a community of believers, rather than holding any distinct spiritual office. This produced a bottom-up model of church governance. In this framework, ministerial authority is generated by the democratic consent of a congregation, usually following a pastor's own internal, subjective feeling that they have been called by God to preach. This side-by-side comparison illustrates the contrast with the historical Catholic model. On the left, authority flows upward from the congregation. On the right, the Catholic paradigm insists that sacred authority is only received from above, moving downward from Christ through an unbroken chain of succession. This top-down structure requires external validation by an existing bishop, relies on physical sacramental transmission to pass on the office, and creates a permanent change in the individual. This video will examine the scriptural evidence for the claim that pastoral authority is a top-down sacramental transmission, evaluating how this model addresses the concept of the self-called pastor. To understand the origin of this priesthood, we first look to the baseline requirement for sacred ministry laid out in the Epistle to the Hebrews. A subjective internal feeling of being chosen is insufficient. Anyone can claim a private revelation or an internal tug toward leadership, but personal conviction does not grant public ecclesiastical authority. This text explicitly outlines the requirement, and one does not take the honor upon himself, but he is called by God, just as Aaron was. Aaron did not declare himself a priest. He received his calling visibly, through Moses, who possessed the lawful authority to consecrate him. We see this exact principle of external validation carried into the early Christian church, most notably with Paul and Barnabas in Acts 13. The church at Antioch receives a direct, divine communication. The Holy Spirit explicitly commands them to set Paul and Barnabas apart for sacred work. Notice the sequence highlighted in this passage. Despite receiving a direct mandate straight from the Holy Spirit, Paul and Barnabas do not simply leave. The community fasts, prays, and physically lays their hands on them before they are authorized to go. The existing church hierarchy acts as an essential gatekeeper. An internal nudge, even one genuinely originating from God, must still be validated by the ordinary, visible leadership of the church. This formal commissioning protects the faithful. If anyone could claim a direct, unverified call from the Spirit to preach or govern, the resulting structure would be total theological chaos. If God intends for ministerial authority to be recognized on earth, he subjects it to the visible, sacramental order he established. Once the need for validation is established, the biblical text focuses on the physical mechanics of how this authority is transferred. In Acts 6, the apostles face a crisis. Hellenist widows are being neglected. To solve this, they established the order of deacons. Yet the apostles still presented them and physically laid hands upon them. The physical gesture was an absolute requirement to transfer religious authority. This practice soon expanded across geographical boundaries. St. Paul later writes to his delegate, Titus, on the island of Crete. Paul commands Titus to appoint elders in every town. If local churches could organically generate their own leaders from the bottom up, Paul's command would be unnecessary. Titus had to be there because true leadership authority had to be formally transmitted through an existing apostolic delegate. This transmission tree follows Paul's instructions for continuous succession. We see 4 generations, Paul handing authority to Timothy, who entrusts it to faithful men, to teach others. This unbroken chain ensures the faith is safeguarded across every generation. Because this mechanism is so vital, Paul issues a stern warning to Timothy: do not be hasty in the laying on of hands. If ordination were merely a democratic vote, Paul would have no reason to be gravely concerned about Timothy's physical act of imposing hands. The ordaining bishop bears a heavy spiritual responsibility precisely because he controls the transmission of divine authority. The physical act of laying on hands is tied directly to unseen spiritual effects on the recipient. A secular delegate derives limited power from the consent of the community. The Catholic view argues ordination actually changes the nature of the man himself. In 2 Timothy 1:6, Paul commands his successor to rekindle the gift of God within you through the laying on of hands. This specific gift, or charism, is not a natural talent for public speaking. It is the literal grace of a calling. The Catholic Church formally codifies this biblical concept in its catechism. The text asserts that holy orders creates an effect reaching into the individual's nature. This diagram illustrates the distinction. While a functionary simply puts on a uniform, Catholic dogma states ordination leaves an indelible spiritual character. The priest's soul is configured to Christ, turning him into an instrument for Christ's own actions. Because this spiritual mark alters the core ontology of the recipient, the sacrament is permanent. It cannot be repeated or erased. Apostolic Succession enacts a permanent transformation of a man's soul to serve the Church. He does not act on the authority of the congregation. He acts on the authority imprinted onto his soul by the successors of the apostles. Opponents of this hierarchical, top-down structure frequently counter with the doctrine of the priesthood of all believers. This argument relies heavily on 1 Peter 2:9, which calls the Christian community a chosen race, a royal priesthood. The Protestant interpretation asserts that because all baptized Christians are already priests, an exclusive ordained clergy is a theological overstep. This Venn diagram reveals the flaw. St. Peter quotes Exodus, where God calls Israel a kingdom of priests. Despite this common priesthood, God simultaneously established a distinct ministerial priesthood to offer sacrifices. The New Covenant maps directly to this precedent. The ministerial priesthood is essentially distinct from the common priesthood of the laity, possessing a unique configuration to serve the Church. The two exist in a specific relational dynamic. The ordained minister is instituted precisely to serve, teach, and offer the Eucharistic sacrifice. If every believer were a priest in the exact same manner, the apostles' exclusive practice of laying hands for sacred ministry would have been redundant. Viewing the complete model, biblical and historical data align. The top-down chain, physical transmission, and dual priesthood integrate perfectly. Apostolic succession is the Church's load-bearing structure, requiring 4 elements: an internal call, external validation, sacramental transmission, and ontological configuration to Christ. In this framework, ministerial authority is tethered to a visible hierarchy rather than self-arrogated claims or congregational voting. The authentic preservation and proclamation of the gospel, the deposit of faith, relies on this unbroken, physical chain of sacramental ordination reaching back across the centuries.